So if you clicked into this video, what you probably want to know is whether or not you can make money using a small home size freeze dryer. Maybe not entirely small, but maybe an XL size. So you and everyone else. So that's what this video is about. Let's get started. Okay, so I have been getting all kinds of inquiries from people. You know, on my last video, we talked about how much money you can make if you move from, say, the small home freeze dryers, having a whole room full of them, or, you know, the XLs, you know, the Harvest Red XLs or the Blue Alpine equivalent, to a big commercial machine. And as you probably saw in that video, the numbers are pretty darn compelling. Now, the problem is that not a lot of people have the bandwidth or the capital or the, you know, the customer base to go from that sort of smallish production to, you know, a $1 million machine that does 1 million pounds a month. So as a result, what you're going to hear in this video today is, how do you take a smaller step, right? And what kind of money can you make if you're just going to use a room full of Blue Alpines? Now I'm going to pick Blue Alpine because they are a great company, right? It's all made in the US. I just really like them. I don't currently have any affiliation with them at all, but I just like the folks that run it. They're after making a better unit rather than making a cheaper unit. And I think that's the right choice. So what I'm going to talk about is, hey, how much money can you make if you have one Blue Alpine XL, right? Okay. Oh, spoiler alert, spoiler alert. I'm going to talk about the Blue Alpine XL unit, which isn't ready for production yet, but it's going to be coming out. I've heard the little bird tell me that it's probably going to be launching January 1st, and they might have a demo unit at the freeze drying summit in Boise in September, right? If you don't know about the freeze drying summit, I'm going to flash up on the screen here a snapshot so you can follow that information if you want. I highly recommend that. I'm going to be there just speaking as a guest. But the guy who's running it is David Lehman. You may already be familiar with him. He runs the Freeze Dried Business YouTube channel. That's enough of that. Now, I'm going to keep this one really short. Okay, I'm going to keep this video really short so that I can get right to the meat and potatoes of what you want to know, which is how much money can I make? Now, there's going to be some shocking results here. Some of them are going to be shocking in a way you don't like, and some are going to be shocking in a way that you say, now we're talking. But I'm just going to just going to put up on screen a spreadsheet that's going to show all these numbers. This is information that I have calculated using, you know, not real time, but real life data and actual capacities, stated capacities of Blue Alpine for their large unit and their XL unit. Okay, so I'm Gene, by the way, from Suntour. Welcome to my channel. If you haven't watched any of my videos before, you really should check out my channel, all my playlists. I've got I'm an educational channel that just teaches people about freeze drying, the physical principles of freeze drying, the business of freeze drying, and the machinery, the engineering, you name it. So I do have an affiliation, if you will, a working relationship with TechSource Systems, commercial freeze dryers. I pick them because I think they make the best commercial freeze dryer in the entire world. And there's lots of reasons for that. And if you want to know more about that, you can just reach out to me on my website, suntour.com. And I can tell you as much as I can send you all kinds of information, or we could do like a meeting or online meeting or whatever you want. If you want a copy of the spreadsheet that I'm going to be showing you in this video, again, link in the description below. Just go there, it's free. You can download that for me, and then and you can look at it at your heart's content, or you can use it in your own business plan. Okay, so let's just get right into the analysis. Oh, but before we do that, would you mind giving me a like? I mean, come on, this is great information. You probably can't find it anywhere else, so do me a favor, give me a like, and if you haven't already subscribed, please do that too. All right, let's get to the data section of this video. As before, in my last video, we're going to start with product yield, because you need to know what your product is going to yield dry after you put it in wet in order for you to calculate how many dry pounds you have for sale, which means how many dollars you can make from those dry pound sales. And the easy way to do that is to just look up the moisture content. These are average moisture contents that I found in public sources. So, and they're average, right? So an average sliced apple, this is the one we're going to look at as apples because it's easy and I know I've done it. So, in my Blue Alpine, so it's just an easy one to talk about. You see it's 84% moisture, which means 16% solids. There's always going to be 3% moisture left at the end of freeze drying. That's typical. So I'm going to add that 3% back into the 16% and I come up with a 19% yield. Now this is a pretty good number. You may get more than that. You may get less. It depends on your apple. And but it's a good, if you just go with the thumb rule of 20%, which is a 5-to-1 reduction in weight, you're going to be close enough that it doesn't matter. Okay, but I'm going to show you here in a minute how this 19% is going to calculate in. So I've got this spreadsheet on so this whole spreadsheet that you're going to see in this part of the video is going to be available. Just download it for me, no problem. The link is below. Okay, so the freeze dryers I'm going to talk about, primarily 2 different models, right? I'm going to talk about the Blue Alpine XL, which I hinted at you, or hinted to you before. I've got some information about from the owners. Now, it's available in January, but you might be able to see it at the Freeze Drying Summit in Boise in September. The Blue Alpine Large, I've listed here. You can look over this data. It will be part of the spreadsheet that you can download. But you're not going to make much money off a Blue Alpine Large unless you're just doing a little hobby side business, selling stuff at the farmer's market on the weekend, which is a great side hustle, by the way. It'll help you get you into the market. It'll help get you out, selling your stuff to customers, see if it has appeal. And hey, it'll make enough money to pay for your machine. And in fact, it'll probably pay for your subsequent machines, just so long as you are the labor, right? And you're thinking about it that way. Okay, so the other machine I'm going to talk about is the TechSource Systems TSS-123, which they also call the big baby, sometimes the bigger baby. The big difference between the XL and the TSS-123 is capacity. So this does 40 wet pounds per day. This does 175 wet pounds per day. And then how much labor it takes, right? So this takes 3/8 of a guy. I'm going to say one guy, 3 hours a day, right? So 3/8 of a guy. And this takes a full-time guy because there's a lot more product to put in and out. You have to prepare all that product, get it frozen, stick it in the freeze dryer, get it out of the freeze dryer, take it to packing tables, all that sort of stuff, and clean up afterwards. So one full-time guy, 3 hours, okay? Now, if I have 10 of them in a room, I'm going to say that it's not going to go to 30 hours, which would be almost 4 guys. It's going to be, I'm going to say you're going to get some synergy there, so only 3 full-time guys. I think that's a pretty reasonable estimate. If you guys have experience with this kind of operation, you can always put comments in the below. I have been to several facilities that have this number of machines, and they do have more than 3 guys. Now, what all those roles are that they're actually working on may vary. So, but I think 3 guys to actually do this process, the production process, which doesn't just include the freeze drying. It includes the steps that are required before freeze drying, which is preparing the product, getting it in the freezer, and then getting it out and putting it in packages. And like I said, clean up afterwards. Now, if you're not pre-freezing before you actually do your freeze drying step, you need to watch my video on my channel that's all about why you should pre-freeze. There is a very compelling reason that you want to do that. It doesn't matter if you're just doing it at home just to preserve your stuff, but if you're in production, every hour in production matters. Okay, so this number here, I'm going to say the cost per wet pound of fruit of apples is going to be about $1 a pound. Now, that's a nice round number, I know, but I think it's a reasonable estimate because you're going to be buying them wholesale from the farmer, perhaps, and maybe doing a little bit of prep. So if I take this $1 per pound and I divide it by that 19%, and you can try this on your calculator at home, you're going to get a factor of 5.3, which means that it's going to have 5.3 times less weight in it than it had before, which means that the cost per pound, you have to raise that cost by the same factor, right? Because this is the base cost, and now it's going to be dry, right? So per pound, you have to multiply that out. Now, to get retail and wholesale prices, I simply went to Amazon. I found that these products, these sliced apples, go for about $60 a pound on average. I say Amazon's going to take 40%, leaving you 60%. So 60% times the $60 a pound is going to leave you 36, and then I take away this cost, right? That's what leads to these here. So retail, $31 a pound, and wholesale, you're going to probably sell it for 20 a pound or so, and you're going to end up with $15 a pound-ish as your profit, your gross profit in wholesale sales, right? So what kind of gross profit can you make from one of these machines? Well, if you do it for 22 hours per month, which is the assumption up here, right? 22 hours per month is simply 5 days a week. No problem. So if I'm doing it for that many hours, that means per month I can get a gross profit of, are you paying attention to this? $61,000 in gross profit from a single Blue Alpine XL. Now, this is not a typo. This is real numbers calculated. And if I'm selling wholesale, I'm still looking at $30K per month. Now, caveat, this is wholesale price, or wholesale profits, gross profits, I should say. This is gross profits, not operating profits. We're going to take into account the operating expenses here in the next step. If I have 10 of them, of course, it's just 10 times, right? If I have a TSS 123, the big baby, on the other hand, I'm going to have less than 10 XLs, but I'm going to have, 2.5, four times, a little bit more than 4 times the production of a single Blue Alpine XL. So I think that's very straightforward. Okay, I have stuff in this chart about proteins and stuff as well. I actually did that analysis on one of my previous recordings. I just droned on and on and on. So I stopped that, right? But it'll still be in the chart. So if you download this chart, you can get all this information anyway. Okay, let's talk about operating costs, because now we have to go from gross profit to operating profit. And to do that, you take gross profit minus the operating costs, and then it gives you operating profit. Okay, so your operating profit is, so the operating cost, rather, is going to include power. Freaked out there a little bit. Power, labor, the payment on your equipment. Now, I have amortized this equipment over 60 months using standard 9 to 11%, which is equipment financing percentage rates right now. I know because I talked to a guy who does this for a living, and he said that if you have good payment history, or rather, if you have a good business plan and you show that you've got a history of running this, at least 2 years of books that they can look at, and you're making enough money to pay for the machinery, then you're probably going to get 9%. But if you're a lot higher risk, it's probably going to be more like 11%. So just keep that in mind. So if you'd have an 11% loan on $150,000 of equipment, which is just what I'm assuming 10 Blue Alpine XLs is going to be. I don't know. I'm not pricing it. I mean, the unit is not even in production yet. But I'm just thinking that's worst case value. It's going to cost you about $3,500 a month, which is going to be if I divide it by the wet pounds per month, it's going to end up to be about 40 cents per wet pound. So that's where this number comes from. And that's kind of worst case scenario. Just keep that in mind. The labor is actually the big bugaboo, right? So if I'm looking at a Blue Alpine Large, which I said I'm not going to, my labor is so high because I don't have very much production, but I still have to put some labor into it. Again, this is okay if you are the labor, right? If you're the labor, then you can make some money with a Blue Alpine Large, with any machine, right? Any freeze dryer, basically. If you're selling the stuff yourself at the farmer's market at full retail price or near it, and you are the person that's operating the machine, you can make enough money to buy then your next larger up Blue Alpine, which is the Blue Alpine XL. Now you notice that the labor charge is less here. It's the same amount of work to load and unload a Blue Alpine XL, when you can get it, as it is a Blue Alpine Large, right? But now you have more than twice as much product that you can get in. You can get in 40 pounds per day instead of 15. Right, that's almost 3 times as much. Maybe a little bit more labor because you have 3 times as much prep work to do. Right, so I think I included 3 hours per day on this one. I think I originally put 2 hours per day on this one, and I think this is about right? Because when I'm filling my Blue Alpine Large, which is what I have in the room behind me here, I think it takes me a couple hours to prep, freeze, dry. I mean, obviously once it's in the dryer, it just runs, right? But then if I just count up all the time that I spend on it outside of the machine working time, I think it's probably about 2 hours. So I think that's a pretty good estimate. Okay, so anyway, if I scroll all the way down here and I take into account my operating costs, right? So what's my total operating costs? I take my operating costs and I include the cost of product. Now it gives me the total cost of goods sold, right? This is without including the overheads like renting your building and what you pay for your administrative staff and that sort of stuff. But if I take the 223, which is the sum of all these costs right here, which is the power, the labor, the equipment payment, the ancillary equipment, right, which might include packaging equipment or packing tables and that sort of stuff. And for a very low level production, which is one Blue Alpine XL, you're not going to need any packing equipment. Well, maybe you'll need funnels and stuff to scoop it out and a scale to measure it and that sort of thing. And maybe one of those sealing bars, but I think that actually comes with the Blue Alpine. So anyway, when I add all that up, I'm going to get $2.23 a pound for a single Blue Alpine XL. I add that to the $1 a pound per wet pound cost of product, and then I divide it by 19%. I get $17 a pound as my operating cost per pound for a Blue Alpine XL. So if I take that away from my wholesale price of $20 a pound, that leaves me a profit of $3 a pound, which doesn't sound great. But just wait a minute. Just wait a little bit here. My operating profit for retail, and this is selling it on Amazon where they're taking basically 40% of your profits. This is not if you're selling it at the farmer's market. Still $19 a pound, not bad. Now, if I put this into monthly totals, right? So this operating profit per month, this is for retail, right? This operating profit per month is for retail. I'm going to still make about $3,000 in operating profit per month on a machine that perhaps costs a maximum worst case scenario of $15,000, which means in 5 months this machine is completely paid for. And I'm not talking about revenue here. I'm talking about operating profit. Right? So if I take this and I multiply it out by 12 months, I'm talking about $40,000 almost per year in operating profit on a single Blue Alpine XL. That is not bad. You could have a nice little side business making product during the week, right? Because it's going to take you about 3 hours a day. So after hours, before and after hours, and then you get your product and you take it to the farmer's market on the weekend. Selling it is a whole different overhead, right? Because you have to put in that labor. That's not included here. But you're still talking about a nice little side business. Now you could take this operating profit, right, that you get in a year, and you can save this money to start making down payments on further machines or buy other machines outright. Now, if I'm going to do 10 Blue Alpine XLs, which is what I have, right? I've got Blue Alpine XL times 10. You would think, well, I'll just multiply these numbers by 10, but actually there's a little bit of economy of scale that I realize because my labor cost divides over a larger amount of product. The equipment payment is roughly the same because now I'm amortizing more money, but there's many more pounds to amortize it over. But my total operating cost comes to $1.96 as opposed to $2.23. And so that carries down as a little bit more money than 10 times. So my $3,000 per month with one Blue Alpine XL becomes $34,000 per month. And this is including 3 people full-time to operate it. Now, the wages have been an assumption, right? The wages is basically $20 an hour. And it's probably going to cost you more than that. But it may not. It depends on who you hire and for how much. So just be aware that that is the assumption. Okay, but still, look, if I'm multiplying that out into a year, I'm talking about $400,000 in operating profit per year for 10 XLs, Blue Alpine XLs in a room operating. Well, how's that going to compare to the Harvest Right XL? Well, the Blue Alpine XL is going to do about 25% more production. And it won't be down all the time, right? So The Harvestrite XL is a fairly decent machine. The Blue Alpine XL is going to be more controllable and it'll do more product, and it's guaranteed to be done with 40 pounds wet in 24 hours. That's what the management tells me. They've tried it on multiple prototype units. So how does that compare with the TechSource Big Baby, the bigger baby, if you will? Well, the bigger baby has a lower labor cost because it only takes one person to load it and unload it, do all the prep work. It's because everything is in one location. You don't have 10 machines to take care of. You don't have 10 vacuum pumps to take care of. You don't have 10 machines to pump down. You don't have 100 trays to handle. You only have 23. And you can take the rack in and out on a little trolley. So you can just get the entire amount of product in, entire amount of product out if you like. So overall, your total operating cost is going to be a little bit less because your labor is less. That's the only difference. Okay, so how does it pencil out at the end of the year? Well, instead of $34,000 per month, you're talking about $16,000 per month. And instead of $400,000, you talk about $192,000. So why on earth would you buy one of these commercial machines instead of just buying 10 Blue Alpine XLs and putting them in a room? Well, there's a good reason for that. There's a really good reason for that. In fact, I did a whole video on it. And I'll put that as one of my end screens, which is basically 7K versus 700K, right? It's comparing it to a larger machine. But the principle still holds. The principle still holds. It's really about labor, scalability, and being able to ramp yourself up into much higher production. And also being able to control the process recipes step by step, every single step, every minute of the way, so that you can tweak your process recipes for different kind of products. But anyway, check out my other videos. Check out this video here, which is the longer version of this particular topic, if you haven't already seen it. So that's going to be all for this one. Thanks very much for tuning in.